from the letter of Romans, actually the letter of the Apostle Paul to the Romans, chapter 12, verses 1 to 3, and the Word of God says, "Therefore, I encourage you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the ways of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you should, but rather think of yourself with reasonable judgment, in accordance with the faith God has given to each of you." May God bless the reading of His word.
Amen. Thank you, Ellie. Those are very beautiful words, and I've read them many times. They're very memorable for a statement of faith, recommendations for what we should do in our lives. But there is nothing really that's more memorable than a story. And there are a lot of great stories in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and in the New. There are lots of stories, in fact, that are in the Bible that everybody just about knows these stories. Even if they don't come to church, even if they're not believers, they have become so predominant that you just learn them as you're growing up. For instance, a lot of them have ands in them. David and Goliath, right? Noah and the flood, Jonah and the whale. All those are very well known. And so is the story of Daniel and the lion's den. It's a wonderful story. It really shows God's power and a great miracle of God. But it also shows what the Apostle Paul was saying today. It's a great story to remind us of this teaching that what we do each day, what we say, how we act, the choices that we make reflect our faith. Right? And they help us to either grow closer to God, or if we make the wrong choices, get further away from God. And that's really what the story of Daniel is all about. Yes, it's about a great miracle, but it's really about this young person who's kind of a genius, I guess, sort of a moral genius, or just was extremely wise for his age, because he knew and he understood, Daniel did, he understood the power of two words. And these two words, if we use them right, can shape our whole lives. They can help us to become the people that God wants us to be, or if we don't use them well, they can take us in the wrong direction. And those two words that Daniel was so good at using and could understand, because he listened to God's Spirit within him, he listens to God's voice in his life. The two words were yes and no. See, Daniel knew when to say yes to things that were going to help him to draw closer to God, and Daniel knew when to say no to those things that were going to take him further away from God. These yeses and nos, he understood that it was through these that his life was built. His character, who he was built by his yeses and his nos, and his good use of each of them. Here we are, people of God, wanting to feel God's inspiration in our lives, wanting to feel God's Spirit with us each and every day, wanting to understand what God would have us do, and then to have the courage, to have the strength to do what Daniel did, to say some good yeses and some good nos along the way. That's what Daniel did. He was able to draw closer to God every day because of the yeses and the nos that he gave out. And that's really the point of this part of the book of Daniel where we read the story. The book of Daniel is where we read the story of Daniel, and this section of it is really all about this idea. Making good choices, good yeses and good nos, and using your discipline. And that was important for Daniel because he had lived a pretty privileged life. He was one of the kind of elite. He was young, he was well educated, he had everything he needed. But then while he was still young, the Babylonians invaded his country, invaded Israel. And the Babylonians, they had a great way to try to get everybody kind of in with their system and their way of doing things. When they invaded the country, they would take the best and the brightest, the young people, and they would take them away to Babylon. And there they would be, and they would dress them in Babylonian clothes, and they would give them Babylonian food, and they hoped that they would kind of see, wow, this is pretty nice. I like this food. I like these clothes. I like this way of living life, and all the perks, all the good things about being a part of this empire. And then they would send the young people back to their home country to try to convince everybody else to be a good Babylonian citizen. And that's what Daniel and his friends were going through. All of those people from Israel that were taken to Babylon, they were trying during those years of captivity to remain true to who God wanted them to be. And they had to use, in order to do that, to use their discipline. They had to be disciplined. They had to say good yeses at the right time and good no's at the right time. And in that way, they could stay true to God. They could stay close to God. That's what Daniel was trying to do, and he had a special genius for it. And he led others to do this as well, so that finally when their captivity was over, they could go back home, still being the people that God created them to be, that God was calling them to be. How did he do it? Once again, he used these two tools that we can all use in our lives as we try to think and try to understand what God wants us to do, what God would have us do in our lives. We can use our yeses and our nos to make that possible, to make our lives the way God wants them to be. For instance, our nos. That was something Daniel was very good at. He finding things that he knew that shouldn't be a part of his life and saying no to them. You know, not letting them get a foothold, just simply, nope, that is not going to be a part of who I am. He used a no, like a chisel, right? Chisel, cut out that part of his life that he didn't believe God wanted to be there. And Michelangelo always said that. They always said, how do you do that? How do you create these beautiful statues, like the statue of David, statue of Moses, and all the beautiful angels that you carved? And he said, it's easy. You get the big block of marble, and you imagine the angel, and then you cut away everything that isn't an angel, and what you have left is a beautiful sculpture. That was exactly Daniel's strategy. Right? Everything in his life that shouldn't be there, everything in his life that he didn't see there as a part of the life that God wanted for him, he chiseled it away. He cut it away, and he was left with something that was remarkable, that was beautiful. It's not easy. It does take discipline to say no when you're supposed to say no. It takes discipline to turn away from things, because I'll tell you, the way temptation works in this world is that it starts with something small. And that's the way it did with Daniel. It started with something a little bit, just the food that he was eating. You know, he was there in Babylon, and let me tell you, they were putting on some great food for these people. These folks were coming into the court. These were the leaders, and there was all the very best food and all these unique and strange and exotic and rich dishes that were there, and the kind of thing where you look at it and you go, I have no idea what's in that, but it sure looks good. But anything could be in there. And Daniel had, Jewish people had all these dietary laws. There are a lot of things that could have been in there that they're not supposed to eat. And so Daniel's strategy, along with his friends, was to say no to all that rich food. And instead they ate what was simple. They ate vegetables, they ate grains, they ate things where they knew what was in it. And in that way, they were able to follow what God would have them do. You know, being able to say no, being able to say, I'm going to cut this out, I'm going to chisel this away. You know, it's kind of like that. One amazing thing about it. When you do this, when we choose to do this in our lives, when we choose to say no to certain things, there's a lesson from nature about this. And it is the lesson that gardeners are practicing right this time of the year. Now is the time when we start pruning things back. And prune things back in your garden, your shrubs and your bushes. Now in the summertime, when you prune, when you're cutting back, you got the clippers out there and you're trying to cut to keep things from growing too big. That's the way you do it in the summer. You're trying to cut back all the things that are growing too much. In the winter, though, when you prune, when you cut back, where you cut is where you want that plant to grow. And that's something you cut where you want it to grow. Because if you start pruning and cutting this time of the year, then in spring, that's exactly where the plant is going to start growing. And that's, again, was Daniel's strategy as well. Cut these certain things out of my life, and my life will become better. It'll become richer. See, we don't think of that because especially in our world, in our society, we think, oh, if I can just get more, if I can just have more, if I can just eat what I want to eat and do what I want to do, then I'm going to be happier. But no, what Daniel learns is that we are able to cut things out in particular ways, in particular places, things we shouldn't be doing, then beautiful things are going to grow up in their place. And that's what Daniel learned. This is cutting things out of my life, cutting things back, and saying no to certain things is going to help me grow and help me grow closer to God every day. But you know what? Daniel didn't get in trouble for saying no, did he? No, Daniel got thrown in the lion's den for saying yes. And that's another strategy he used, to say yes to those things he was supposed to say yes to, like prayer and worshiping God. Again, the king makes this silly rule that people are not supposed to worship God. It was a law, and it was punishable by this terrible, terrible death penalty. Not just to die, but to die by being eaten by lions. It's as awful as you could think. And Daniel still said, no, absolutely, this is something, worship, praying to God is something I absolutely have to say yes to. I'm not going to turn my back on that. And see, that was another strategy for building it up. Of course, he got caught, he got thrown into the lion's den, but through a great miracle, the lion's mouths were shut. And he survived, and the law was changed, and everything was made as right as it could be made. And the story is, it's easy to look at this story then and say, oh, the point of this story is the miracle of the lions. But really, one of the great points of this story is the courage that Daniel showed in saying yes to something that God was calling him to. Believe me, that happens to us all the time today. These opportunities to say yes to something, but you know, those around us may not like it. They may not support it, but it's something we feel called by God to do. It reminds us that there are other ways to sculpt than just chipping away. Now, that was Michelangelo with marble. You've got to chip it away. But to sculpt, too, you can use something soft like clay, and you can add to it. And a great lesson there, both with the chipping away and with the adding to, is it's all done slowly. Right? It's not something we do overnight. It's something we work toward. It's something we develop over many days, many months, many years, trying to add these good things to life. And you know, if we're going to do this, whether it's cutting things away or adding to, we have to have a picture of what we want our life to be. The picture of what God wants our lives to be. And then we can start adding to, we can start chipping away. I like the story about Socrates, the great philosopher, and somebody once asked him, how do you get to Mount Olympus? And he said, well, just make sure that every step you take takes you one step closer. Always be heading in that direction. That is as simple as it gets. So in our lives, if we want to feel closer to God every day, we need to make sure that every step we take takes us closer to God. If in our lives, you know, think about our own list, but maybe in our lives, we don't, when people aren't around, we have a way of not speaking about them as kindly as we should. And maybe that's something we need to take away, and we need to add something else there and watch as something else grows. There are a lot of things we can say yes to, a lot of things we can say no to, and each of these things can help us to get closer to God. But here is a big warning here. Big warning. It's right there in the midst of the story. In fact, it's the thing that draws everybody's attention. If you want to go around and you want to start doing God's will in this world, you want to start doing things that make this world a little bit more like God's kingdom, you try to make this world more the way God would have it be, then watch out. Because you could well be thrown in a lion's den. Those around us have a way of punishing us. The world has a way of punishing us when we don't accept and buy into what everybody around us is saying. It takes courage then. Courage, like Daniel, to go against some of the things we're hearing in this world. I mean, if we live in a world where there is anger all around us, and we say no to that anger, we say, no, I'm not going to live my life every day with fear and with anger, always looking for something to feel insulted and angry about. If we say no to that, then be prepared in this world where there's so many angry people to be thrown into the lion's den. I mean, if in this world we find people that lack compassion, lack understanding, that are full of judgment, full of hatred, and we go against that, if we instead choose and decide that we are going to go through life promoting what Jesus clearly said to us, that every person in this world, no matter their age, no matter their social status, no matter their income or their wealth, no matter their color, no matter their nationality, no matter their mental state or mental illness, every person is of worth in this world. Every single person, because that is the gospel that Christ taught us, and every person is absolutely welcomed in the kingdom of God, and every person we see in this world, whether we like them or not, whether we agree with them or not, each person is a unique creation of God. We go around preaching that, and believe me, there are people that will throw us in the lion's den. So the question then for us is, and it is the final question here today, do we have the courage to step in to this kind of lion's den? Do we have the strength to take opposition with the things of this world that we know are not the way God would have them be? My prayer is that with the strength of your faith, and with the power of God's Spirit resting in your heart and moving in your life, you say many, many good yeses and many, many good no's that help you each day to answer hatred with love. And help you in all that you do draw closer and closer each day to God and to God's kingdom. Let's bow in prayer. Loving God, our prayer today is for courage. Lord, here this week ahead, help us to see and to understand what you would have us do, what you are calling us to, and then, Lord, help us to have the courage to do it, to say it, to move each day in a way that draws us closer to you, whether or not it's a popular choice or a popular decision. Lord, help us to see and understand what you would have us do. And Lord, we do ask that you be with us now. And may this time that we spend here at this table strengthen us and enable us to feel your Spirit with us each day. May these elements of bread and cup remind us that we are receiving you, and we take you with us into this week ahead if we choose. Loving God, may that presence that we feel here at this table be a presence that we can feel not only here, but throughout this week ahead. Lord, bless these elements of bread and cup to the nourishment of our bodies and our spirits. In Jesus Christ's name we pray.